Can I date during my divorce? Can I cancel my spouse's insurance? How long is this divorce going to take? Our divorce attorneys get asked a lot of different questions. And on episode 87 of the Starting Over Stronger show, we're going to talk about all the questions that you have about your divorce and who you should be asking them to. I hope you'll join us.
Welcome to the Starting Over Stronger show, where you'll find help and hope for your divorce survival and recovery. Divorce well, live well.
Welcome back to the Starting Over Stronger show. It's great to be here today with another fabulous divorce attorney who is passionate about helping people do divorce better. Today's guest is Alyssa Hodges. She's a family law and estate planning attorney in Jackson County, Missouri. And I'm going to let her tell you a little bit more about how she found herself as an attorney. So welcome to the show, Alyssa.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited about this.
Awesome. Well, really tell us about you.
I am, as you said, a family law attorney and estate planning attorney. And a lot of people go, how does that go together? It actually goes together a lot. And you talked about that on another podcast. You do not want your spouse to be making decisions for you in the middle of your divorce. You don't want them making health decisions, financial decisions. And so your estate planning during your divorce is really important. I'm also getting an LLM in tax. And I've come to realize how important that is whenever you're drafting judgments. People don't think about how their taxes are going to be affected long-term when they get divorced. But there are some major considerations, especially when you have multiple kids and you're now the head of household. It's really good to have those conversations.
Very good. Very good. Well, how did you find yourself in the profession of law? And what has that transition been like for you?
Well, I started out as a songwriting major, believe it or not.
Okay.
I was not interested in the law. I was always a good student. I enjoyed school, the studying part of school. But I didn't want to go to college, actually. I just wanted to write music. And during one of my songwriting classes, I learned about copyright law. And I was like, ooh, I kind of want to be a copyright lawyer. So I started looking into that. And then I went to UMKC for law school originally. And I focused mainly on intellectual property. So trademarks, patents, copyright. I was one of the only girls, if not the only girl, in most of my classes. And I was a total nerd. I absolutely loved all of it. Tax law is actually very similar to patent law in that you're reading statutes that are very confusing. And on their face, they seem to mean one thing, but as you look deeper, they don't mean that at all. So it's very dry, boring stuff, but for some reason, I love it.
And I think if I recall when we first met, you told me that family law was maybe kind of the last thing you ever saw yourself doing. How did you make it into that?
Yeah, I said I would never do family law. When I started law school, I was like, that's the one area of law I will never do. I didn't even say that about criminal law at the time. And then whenever I graduated, I accepted a job at Deloitte. So I worked for Deloitte for 2 years. And I saw a lot in that job that made me want to help people on a personal level. And so I started looking into adoption, and I was going to work for an adoption attorney. And he called me. This was at the start of COVID when I got licensed. And he called me and said, I am getting so much done because I'm doing all of these Webex hearings. And so I don't need help, but my niece needs help, and she does family law. So I'm like, oh no, but I really, really liked her when I met her, like right away, and her partner, and just had a really great experience working for her. I left their firm, but I really enjoyed the work that we did, and I learned so much from her.
So you discovered that family law was pretty rewarding, even though you didn't think you'd want to do it.
Yeah, it's amazing. and I almost wonder if we do that to ourselves in life, like we avoid the thing that we're really meant to do. Because for me, I was like, family law is so emotional. I don't want to do that. I just can't do that. And the more that I get into it, the more I'm like, when I get a text message from a client that says, I get to see my son for Christmas this year, and if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be able to do that. There's no other feeling that I get. I would never get that from patent law, like, thank you for getting me this patent. It doesn't hit the same way.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. And listeners, as always here on the show, we're looking for ways to have new and important conversations with you about all the practical and emotional matters that you face as you consider or endure a divorce. And today is going to be no exception. And in fact, this is an exciting topic because so many of my clients, and I'm sure Alyssa's as well, are talking about how they can save money on their divorces. And it may seem counterintuitive that it could be as simple as what kinds of questions you need answered when you need them answered and who you're going to get them answered by. But today we're going to talk about all of that, about the questions people ask their divorce attorneys and what questions they should be asking their attorneys and who else they might want to lean on to avoid running up that attorney's bill. So I am just going to basically work through a list of questions that Alyssa has provided for me that she's, they're frequently asked questions that she's dealt with. And so we'll just start with that and I'll pitch every question and Alyssa will tell us whether or not this is a legal question that you should be discussing with your attorney. And if not, who might be a better alternative for that. And then I will chime in at the end with a little bit of coaching advice on each one. So I'm going to guess that number one on the list is possibly the question that you get asked the most often. And that is, can I date during my divorce? So I'll let you run with that.
Yes, a lot of clients ask this. It's a normal question to have. If I could rephrase this question, I would say, should I date during my divorce? This is not a legal question, but there are legal considerations involved. For instance, it's a really great idea to avoid getting pregnant during your divorce. Please don't do that. It will extend your time in court. It's very stressful for everyone involved, especially if you don't know who the other parent is. I've seen that happen before. It's so stressful. Don't immediately move in together. Please don't introduce your kids during the divorce. I mean, it's a personal decision that you're making, but I have seen judgments that were agreed upon blow up over that. And, your divorce attorney went to law school, and in your relationship, your attorney-client relationship, they have to be the rational, non-emotional person, because if they get emotional, they're going to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And when they make mistakes, it costs you money. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we really need divorce coaches, therapists to be there so that when we have these questions that are not legal questions that could be sent to someone else who's maybe not going to charge you as much, you need those people. And your friends and family are good to talk to, but they don't always have great advice, unfortunately. Yeah. And may not have even been through what you're going through. Take a beat, get to know yourself. When we talked, I really loved your perspective on dating, because it's like you're trying to get to know yourself. And so you're not approaching going out with someone as, oh, this is probably my future spouse. It's just, do I like Thai food? Do I like this particular drink? Those are the kinds of questions that you want to know about yourself before you find the next person. And then, please get a prenup. Please get a prenup. So there's a circuit split. When Mandy Pingle was on your show, she talked about that super thick update that comes out for family law every single year. So this is the kind of stuff that gets published in that. There's a circuit split between the Western District and the Eastern District over prenups. And in the Western District, they're favored. So if you live in the Kansas City area, there is no reason to not get a prenup. Okay. Now you cannot make plans about your children and your children's money in that, but you can about your property and how you would want that to be divided if for some reason you do end up getting divorced. no one wants to get divorced. Nobody goes into marriage thinking they're going to get divorced. But at the same time, when you get in your car, you put your seatbelt on, right? Like you're not hoping that you get into a wreck, but it's there in case you need it. And I had a law professor in business organizations who always said, people never think about the breakup of their business. They only think about how much money they're going to make when they succeed. And it's really important to think about the end at the beginning when you still like each other.
Yeah, that's good advice. And so you're relating the prenup to dating during divorce in that if they're getting serious with someone new, or are you just saying like if you're hearing this now and you're new in a relationship period, you should be thinking about this?
Oh yeah, both. Just, when you're in a divorce and you're experiencing that, you ask yourself, how do I prevent this from happening before? Why is this so messy? You can do all of that before. Except for the kids. That part you can't deal with in the prenup. Right. But yeah, if you're dating someone and things are getting serious, it's a good conversation to have.
Yeah, for sure. And back to your question, can I date during divorce? Should I date during divorce? When I weigh in on this as a coach, my answer is, I can't say it's 100% no, but it's pretty close. Like, I don't want you to do that because there's so many things that could go wrong. You know, and like, I feel like we spread ourselves too thin already with our family life and our work life and just life. And now we're going to add another layer when it's like starting to write a new chapter when you haven't even read or written the former one. It's like one thing at a time, like let yourself breathe a little. And like you said, I did say, get to know yourself because, I actually am working on writing a podcast episode right now on how to find a date worth keeping. And that's all about the strategy that I implemented after my own divorce to meet and find and get into a healthy relationship that will be my forever relationship. And the steps that I took to attract that into my life. And so I will say a big part of that is healing. And I think in large part, we have to heal a lot of the wounds from our childhood and that first marriage, which oftentimes blend together. We oftentimes chose that first marriage partner because of unhealed child wounds. And so if it hasn't been dealt with prior to the divorce, it needs to be dealt with then. And that's best done as a solo venture. And then there are more steps to healing that can really only happen once you're in a relationship. But the best foundation for that is to heal what you can on your own first, and then get into a relationship and know exactly what you're looking for, what's good, what's not good, and go from there then on to begin healing those relational type wounds that are going to come from lack of trust due to things that happened in the former marriage and all of those kinds of things. So that's my advice on dating during divorce. Sure, you can. Nobody can tell you that you can't, but it's a calculated risk. And I think the wise thing to do is to measure whether or not at this point in your life, you're even going to attract what you're looking for. Or maybe you just want to have some fun, and that's okay. So it really depends on your motive, I think, going into it. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Talked about when you go to the grocery store and you don't have a list. And I thought that was such a great illustration. Yeah, because it's true. You got to know what you're looking for. Otherwise, you're going to end up with a cart full of, for me, it would be a cart full of popcorn for sure.
Yeah, exactly. That's, and I love that analogy because it just so fits with, if you think about it, you go to the grocery store when you're hungry and you don't have a list, you bring home things that look good and taste good, but they don't make a complete meal. And the same thing is going to happen in your dating life. So that is a good analogy. But on to the next question. And that is, can I cancel my spouse's health insurance during my divorce?
This is definitely a legal question. There's a statute on it, and you cannot cancel your spouse's health insurance during litigation. Now, if you're paying for your spouse's kids and they're non-marital kids, I would talk to your attorney about that. Hey, can I go ahead and cancel their insurance? There are a lot of questions like this that people ask, can I cancel their phone? Can I cancel their car insurance? It's very fact specific, but this is one of those things where the courts are not going to be okay with you canceling their health insurance. Absolutely do not do it.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem here is that there's a whole lot of people that don't ask the question. They just do it. So what happens to the person that's the victim of that when that happens? Is there any recourse for them since it's not really legal for them to do?
It kind of depends on your judge. And what else has gone on in the case. If you're the person who's canceling everything and you're just trying to be spiteful, you're going to get in trouble. I mean, there's a statute, you're going to get in trouble. But that is a question you should run by your attorney before you do anything about. And I think it's a question that a lot of people don't know. I've certainly gotten that phone call before. Hey, I canceled this and I canceled this. And I'm like, no, you didn't. Call
them back. Okay. Well, that's good to know. And I think it's important to mention too, that I think you should be talking with your attorney if you're the person making those decisions, but also if you are the person that's affected by those decisions, it is a good time to have a conversation with your attorney. I think in a lot of cases, the judge is going to look at that as, or I guess I should say, what I have heard from other attorneys is that judges are looking for people who are making responsible decisions to keep the status quo as is throughout the divorce process and stop moving pieces of the puzzle around, because that just affects the overall picture. And you're not divorced until he signs the papers. So stop making decisions like you already are, right?
Absolutely. There are some attorneys that think, okay, I know where the lines are. I can do this. I can do that. My client can make this as ugly. And you know what they're doing is they're trying to run up their client's bill. So yes, there are tons of things that you can do. But again, should you do it? Is it really going to make you look like a great co-parent? Is it going to make you look like a great spouse that's trying to cooperate? Probably not. Probably not.
Okay, so next question. Do you think I've got a shot at sole legal or sole physical custody?
This is a legal question also, and I do get this question a lot. It really depends. It's a very fact-specific question. It depends on your judge. There are some judges where if you file a case and ask for sole legal, sole physical, they're automatically going to appoint a guardian ad litem. And there are some guardian ad litems that are really, really good at what they do. And obviously, I'm not going to list my favorites, but I have some favorites. And then there are some that the second that they're on your case, you're like, oh, please get off. And you can file a motion to disqualify a guardian ad litem, but you also make enemies doing that. So you have to be careful. I would say generally you shouldn't do that. I just had this conversation, since you and I talked, I had this conversation with someone. There are a lot of attorneys who will fight for you to get sole legal, sole physical custody. And if you get it, it's a miracle if you even get it. But then within a year or 2, 3, you're right back in court because your co-parent has decided that you're not doing things that they like. They're not having enough control. They can't communicate with the school. They can't communicate with the doctors. So they drag you back into court. And so when people are settling and figuring out what works for them, and they're working together to make a parenting plan instead of a judge who doesn't know them making that plan, it works out much better. And then you don't end up back in court a couple of years later when you're still paying your attorney from, the first trial. Yeah. So I hate seeing that. It hurts my heart. And also it's not good for your kids to watch you be in litigation, every 2 years. It's not healthy.
And I think that's really at the heart of that question, because, just like we said, can I date? The real question you should be asking is, should I date? I think it's the same here. Do you think I've got a shot at sole custody? Well, why do you want that?
Right.
What is your motive for that? If there's legitimate abuse, and I don't just mean physical abuse, I mean emotional abuse, verbal abuse, financial or psychological abuse. There's a lot of different layers of abuse. And unfortunately, the burden of proof generally falls to the victim. However, if there's a legitimate motive that involves someone's mental or physical safety, then that's a good question to ask and to explore how you're going to need to represent yourself and what kind of data you're going to need to gather and document in order to be able to have a chance at getting awarded that. But if you're just doing it because you're mad at your soon-to-be ex, that's not a good motive. And I think, it is a legal question, and I don't know how much as a lawyer you get into the motives behind these questions, but I think that's at the heart of it all is, why do you want it? And does it even make sense for you to have it? And is that something that you kind of work through with people?
Definitely. It's really hard, especially when kids are really, really young. I've been there. I went through that personally. You think that's my baby. I'm the person who's supposed to take care of them, and this doesn't feel right. There's this poem that's really great. It's by Khalil Gibran. It's called On Children. And I read that when I was going through all of that. And it really talks about how our kids are not really ours. We get to raise them. We get to be in their lives, but we're not meant to control them or make them think the way that we think. And so when I shifted my thinking personally and realized this is the best thing for my child is to have two parents involved in her life, raising her, who love her. When you stop thinking about your child as property, you start to parent in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you have to really dig deep, and it's hard to do this when you're wounded and you're vulnerable and overwhelmed. But just because, a spouse maybe cheated on you or didn't love you the way you needed to be loved does not inherently make them a bad parent. However, at some point, if that same behavior is being, projected or whatever onto the children, and those children are experiencing an unsafe love in any way, shape, or form, then that is a different issue. So you really have to almost, to me, if there's been any level of toxicity or abuse, you need to have a therapist, one, and a coach, because the therapist and the coach do two totally different things. But the therapist, especially, because you need somebody that can help you to reframe all of this and to see, am I projecting my marital issues onto my kids, or are these legitimate parenting concerns? And that really is what this question comes down to, in my opinion, as a coach.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've noticed a lot lately is that teenage boys, especially, we're having a lot of problems with them looking up videos online that they shouldn't be looking at. And then mom and dad are arguing over that because dad thinks it's not really a big deal and mom does. If you're going to co-parent with someone and you're going to be a parent forever, you have to learn how to forgive someone and to be able to say, hey, you did something wrong. You cheated on me. You stole money, whatever it was. That doesn't mean that you're a horrible parent. It just means you're a human being. And same thing with your kids. If your kids are looking at something they shouldn't be looking at, talk to them about it. Do not repeatedly beat them up about it, because you are their parent forever and you're the only person who can unconditionally love them.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So that's our final word on that. You got to learn to separate your issues from your kids, and that's going to help inform that decision about custody.
Are you getting the support you need as you divorce or face the possibility of divorce? Did you know that for just $55 a month, you can be a part of a 1-hour weekly support group call of people just like you? Some haven't even filed yet, but they know the marriage is not sustainable or healthy. Some were served papers they didn't want. Others are feeling empowered that they finally took the reins of their life and hired an attorney and a divorce coach to help them navigate the uncertain waters of divorce. All of them are facing fear, grief, loss, confusion, and pain, and they're finding help and hope in a Starting Over Stronger support group. You can get registered today for a group at startingoverstronger.com/groups and start this week in getting the help you need to divorce well and then live well. Remember, divorce is hard. Life after doesn't have to be, but the support you get now is what makes the difference.
So the next question is, how long is this divorce going to take?
This is probably my least favorite question I get asked.
Can you get it done yesterday, please?
I cannot. I wish that I could. Believe me, when I worked at Deloitte, my nickname was Turbo because I'm always trying to figure out, like, how can I get this done faster? It's going to take 3 times longer than you think that it is going to take. I will say in some counties, you could do an uncontested divorce, meaning both parties agree on everything. This is rare. It does happen. You could do that by affidavit. Both parties could waive the 10-day waiting period and get that done. But we're talking like this is probably like one case in your career that you're going to have as an attorney. This is not, that's like best case scenario. In reality, COVID has affected every part of this process. I've seen more special masters hearings because the courts are just overwhelmed. They have, when you put people in their houses together, trying to work, take care of kids, school kids, we've had a lot of people filing for divorce the last couple of years. Yeah. And so everybody is backed up. We've also had the appeals court has started to put out opinions that disfavor Webex hearings. And so that is also an issue. I think there are a lot of cases that are going to end up being appealed. And when you appeal a case, it goes through the appeals court and then it gets kicked back to the trial court. They typically remand it back. And so they're having to litigate these cases twice because of Webex hearings. And then also, I've had cases where opposing counsel got COVID during the case. It's horrible. And honestly, it's really hard to be really adversarial when someone's on oxygen. You know, like we're supposed to be adversarial, but when you're worried that someone's going to die, you're like, no, I will give them a continuance. It's okay.
Yeah, right.
So it's tough to really know. Just expect it to take a long time. It's not good. It won't take you 5 years. Unless
it shouldn't.
You feel it.
That has happened. And I have more often than I would like. I have seen 2 to 3 years. And you know that, but you know, the answer to the question, how long is it going to take? I mean, you can't answer that, but really it's like I tell people all the time who are asking, where can I get a cheap attorney? Well, the attorney is only as cheap as your egos and emotions are uninvolved. Because it's not the attorney necessarily, although certainly there are attorneys that do this, but it's not the attorney that is intentionally running up your bill. It's your or your soon-to-be ex's egos or emotions that are driving everything. So get those in check and it'll go a lot quicker. And then, of course, COVID has affected everything. I'm actually surprised to hear that there's opinions that are disfavoring Webex hearings because I can't remember now what attorney it was I interviewed on the show. It's been probably a year ago when we were talking about this. And it actually came up that there's some evidence that at least in domestic violence, and it might have been the domestic violence judge that I had this conversation with, they're actually finding more favorable results because the victim is not having to be as exposed to the abuser. So there's, a level of protection there that nothing besides an online conference can provide. So I hope that they at least take that into consideration if they go that direction.
Also, they can catch when the abuser is with the victim on a Webex hearing. Have you seen those videos where the judge?
No, but that's a good point.
Yes. But I will say when all of this started, it was 2020. There was a commissioner in Jackson County who said she was concerned about the Webex hearings because she felt like it was immediately grounds for appeal because you don't know who's coaching the witness. And so anyway,
Yeah.
I could rant on that for an hour.
It's a valid point. I just think that they need to take a lot of different things into consideration. And overall, my message to the world is that we need to be talking more about covert, narcissistic, emotional, and verbal abuse, because in large part, it gets swept under the rug and the victim pays the price in divorce court. And so if in those cases, which there are a lot more of those cases than anyone wants to talk about, Webex or Zoom hearings actually do help in some situations. Yes. So it's something that I hope is considered anyway. Okay, so the next question is, what do you think the judge is going to say about fill in the blank?
In law school, they don't teach us how to read minds. They don't teach us how to tell fortunes. I can't tell you what the weather's going to be like tomorrow. I don't know if it's going to snow and they're going to make me stay home and not go to court. I'm also not any kind of a doctor. I'm a doctor of law, but I'm not a doctor. I'm not a police officer. And so I don't know what the judge is going to do. If you encounter a divorce attorney who says the judge is absolutely going to do X, I know exactly what the judge is going to do, you need to run. That person is going to disappoint you. It's going to end badly. You're going to be very upset. Yeah. Attorneys, the building that I work in, there are attorneys who have been practicing since before I was born. And they will tell you that they don't know what a judge is going to do, that they went to law school with, Yeah. So anybody who says, yeah, I know exactly what this judge, now there might be people out there who clerked for a judge. And so they know what the judge is going to do. That's possible. But I still would say, don't put money on what they tell you the judge is going to do. They don't teach us how to read the judge's mind, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, and that's only fair, really. Your clients can't really expect you to know things that you can't possibly know. That being said, though, I mean, I feel like some attorneys do have some insight into patterns of behavior of certain judges and GALs and so forth, and they could have valuable advice to offer given your specific situation and the factors in your case. So it doesn't necessarily hurt to ask. Just don't expect them to have a crystal ball. You have to take whatever they say to you with a grain of salt. And I think it's important to point out as a coach that a lot of these questions seem to kind of put you in the seat of trying to remove all doubt and uncertainty from a divorce. And I think what I want people to know about this is that is just simply not possible. One of the things I work with my divorce coaching clients is that divorce is inherently uncertain. And there is only so much that anyone can know or do to bring any level of certainty to it. And I think what's most important when you're thinking about all these kinds of questions is for you to get a grasp on your expectations and to reel them in, because that, it's all the E words: egos, emotions, and expectations are all the things that make divorce hard. Divorce is actually a very simple legal paperwork process. It's just when you add in all the ego and emotion and, the expectations that are different on one side and the other, that, everybody just gets up in arms or feels, lost or powerless or what have you. So, I think it's important to think about that, because this is yet another mindset issue, like really almost everything is.
Yeah, so. Absolutely. I know I keep bringing this up, but the podcast that you did with Mandy Pingle, I loved it because you guys talked about, sharks versus bulldogs. And I agree that you do want a bulldog. You want somebody who's going to fight for you. But you don't really want a shark.
Yeah.
You want a shark. You don't want a shark.
Yeah, that's a teaser. Now you have to go back and listen to. That was the episode on how to select a divorce attorney that you'll love. And it was earlier this year. So it wasn't too far back. If you haven't heard it, go give it a listen, because those are my terms, sort of. I mean, I borrowed them, but bulldog and shark, Mandy did not use those terms. That wasn't her coming up with that. It was just me saying, this is how I talk to my clients and how I explain what you're looking for. So anyhow, so, well, we've run through, I think, all the main questions that you gave me on your list. So I think the best way to wrap this up would be to just talk a little bit about your perspective as an attorney on what is the most important things for people to bear in mind when they do need to communicate with their attorney, or, how to do it efficiently or effectively. What would you say to that?
One of the things and I love that you're planning to talk to a guardian ad litem eventually, because I think that would be really, really helpful for your listeners. Guardian ad litems see a lot of things that are like you wouldn't even see in your worst nightmare. Yeah. It's horrible. And so one of the things that I have tried to explain to my clients is when you're communicating with your attorney, or you're communicating with the guardian ad litem, mediators, your co-parent counselor, we've all seen some things. So if you're upset because I'm not making this up, I've read this before. I've read Our Family Wizard messages about fingernails being clipped when they shouldn't have been clipped. Wow. There are kids who get locked in closets for days that starve. There are kids that get brutally beaten by a parent. And so some of the things that seem earth-shattering to you, your attorney is not going to care about. And it's not that they don't, they're your advocate. It's not that they don't care about you. It's just when we hear about a child being starved versus you're upset because somebody got a haircut and you don't like the haircut, sometimes we're just not going to get as worked up about it as you are. And I think
that's a good thing. They're paying you for your ability to be calm and reasonable and to bring them back to where they need to be. And if they're not, they need to realize that is your best value to them.
Yes. Call your divorce coach, call your therapist, talk about the haircut, talk about the fingernails being trimmed. But the guardian ad litem you don't want them charging you to have that conversation because I could probably go off on this for an hour. I had this conversation with a client once. I don't think she would mind me sharing what she said, but she was like, "Oh, wow, I will check my privilege." Like, I did not realize that that's the kind of stuff that goes on. I mean, we're talking, you'll have cases where somebody is in prison because they got caught with child pornography. And then when your client's calling you upset because their child wore the wrong shirt to a school activity or something, it's like, this doesn't matter. I know it matters to you. This is not a thing. Yeah. So those are the kinds of questions where you need to run those by your friends, your family, your divorce coach, your therapist, but don't talk to your attorney about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's doing you a favor, guys, by telling you that, because she's saving you money. This isn't her wheelhouse. This isn't where you need to be with your attorney. So I really appreciate her candor on that. And I am looking at interviewing a GAL because they play such a heavy role, especially for those who are leaving toxic and abusive situations. And I want to pick their brain. So if there's a GAL listening today, or if somebody listening has a GAL that really represented them well or is doing a superb job for them, I would love it if you would connect us, because I really don't know at this point who I'm going to interview on that, but I would love to do that. So thank you for mentioning that, Alyssa. And thank you so much for being here and sharing your wisdom and your perspective on all of these things. I think these should be very helpful tips for people who are listening here today.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you for the work that you're doing. It really is helping people. It's helped me, and I've been able to share with my clients. And so I thank you very much. Make our jobs easier too. So
that's the goal. Make it, I mean, it's a win-win-win. If you hire a coach along with your attorney, your attorney's going to love it. You're going to love it. And I love helping people do divorce better. And so my perspective on all of this, when you think about, what questions to ask and who to ask them, is simply that, again, we just have to reduce or eliminate our expectations, maybe shift our perspectives, and as much as possible, because really understand and really hone in on what is this person's area of expertise. Your lawyer is a legal professional. So your financial questions belong with a financial professional. Your questions about mental health involve your therapist. Your questions about how do I put all of this together and make sense of it and deal with my overwhelm and emotions is your coach's wheelhouse. So it's really just about understanding who's doing what and understanding that the team approach to divorce is going to be the best approach for you so that you don't end up in a situation that you regret later on. So thank you, listeners, for joining us today. I hope you've picked up on some really great tips for how you can more effectively communicate with your attorney. And if you're looking for an attorney and you're in Jackson County, and she may tell us other counties that she practices in, I hope you'll give Alyssa a call. Tell us how they can get a hold of you if they'd like to touch base with you.
My website is called firebreathinglitigator.com, which
okay.
my law school have never forgotten. My phone number is 816-895-2990. You can send me an email through my website. I've got a paralegal that you can contact if you want. We're on Facebook.
And you practice predominantly in Jackson County, or are there other counties in Missouri that you work?
I practice all over Missouri. I have gotten referrals for cases in Camden County, Boone County. Clay County I've been in. I'm trying to think of the farthest ones, but yeah, pretty much anywhere in Missouri. I will go. I don't mind.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And listeners, if you'd like more coaching support on how to effectively communicate with your attorney, your soon-to-be ex, and even yourself, maybe as you divorce, I'd love to have you join a support group. We meet 1 hour a week on Zoom in small groups of people just like you, and it costs less than you might think. So find out more at startingoverstronger.com/groups and register today to start getting the support you need this week. And I will see you again here next week for more help as you divorce and hope as you are starting over stronger.